I'm Steve McMenamin and welcome to the New Property Show. In this show we're joined by Cullen Haynes from Sydney. He's going to be discussing the Sydney property market and what to watch out for. We're also joined by Sadvik, who's going to be speaking to us about mortgages, most importantly first home buyer grants. Olga from Tax Assure is going to be speaking to us about the ATO and how they're clamping down on directors. More questions from our audience to our panel. But first, selecting building products and building materials.
The materials used in your property construction have a significant impact on its long-term performance, durability and energy efficiency. Careful planning and selection of materials and products and the way they are combined can improve the cost effectiveness of the overall property whilst reducing the environmental impact. It is important to understand the site and the surroundings of the build and what products will suit that environment. Examples of this are, if the build is high up on a hill, it may be subject to extreme elements, and you may need to use products that are resistant to high winds. Or if it is in a bushfire area, non-combustible products should be a priority. The quality of the materials used is the difference with a premium construction and an average build. There are many quality manufacturers in Australia that produce high quality products, and it is important to understand which building material is the best fit for your build. For example, Littlehampton Bricks and Pavers was established well over 120 years ago and is one of the country's unique boutique brick manufacturers. Littlehampton has retained its original flexible heating processes that has helped with innovation in its products, which extends to textures, colours and finishes on their range of bricks and pavers. Littlehampton supplies its quality products to projects all over Australia and the world. Accent Aluminium Windows and Doors has been in the industry for more than 35 years. This award-winning company produces high-quality custom products that will even cater for extreme conditions in Australia. Craftsmanship, obviously, isn't something that just happens. It requires a great deal of time, patience and effort. Accent is well known in the industry for its aluminium doors and windows that last.
All right, we're joined here by Cullen from Sydney, hey? Legal home loans. What do you specialise in?
We specialise, wait for it, loans tailored exclusively for legal professionals. Barristers, partners, graduates to managing partners.
Beautiful.
Just lawyers.
You and I were discussing off camera earlier about lender's mortgage insurance.
Correct.
I want to start with the nasty stuff first, and then we'll bring it back to the good stuff. What's going on out there? What's happening in the lending world?
Yeah, well, in the lending world, as we know, we've had 7 rate rises, which for people's borrowing power is just, it's hammering it, really. We've had clients that have had their pre-approval since January and say they were pre-approved for $1 million. After all those rate rises, it's between $750,000 to $800,000. So that's impacting it. But lender's mortgage insurance, which you talked about, is largely unknown. Even lawyers themselves don't really understand it. And we started our business 4 years ago because lawyers don't need to pay that. They can borrow up to 90% and not pay lender's mortgage insurance. But it's largely unknown that the banks, actually, it's an insurance to protect the banks rather than the individual. And on a $1 million home, if you're borrowing 90%, it's 20 grand that you don't need to pay if you're a legal professional. And if you go to the wrong bank or broker, they're just saying, oh, just don't worry about it, just sign it. They just put it into the loan. And typically that's when most legal professionals reach out to us, is because they see something's not right in the contract and they're like, I don't think I should have to pay this. And that's when they come and speak to us.
Is there anyone in terms of other professions? I understand you're looking after lawyers, but there's a couple of other professions out there that are sort of tailored for and looked after in the lending world as well?
There are. So doctors get a similar benefit. They can, in point of fact, borrow with certain banks higher, 95, 100% at times. Accountants and CPAs also get that as well. But most brokers, when they get into the industry, they either look after all people or doctors. It's kind of well looked after. We're still the only mortgage broker out there looking after lawyers. I don't know why. It seems that no one likes looking after lawyers. We love them. We find it very rewarding.
Now, Sydney versus Melbourne. At the moment, we've had a lot of guests on here. They've covered their average loan value is around about $700,000-800,000 in established market. Melbourne's now $1 million suburbs.
Yes.
Talk to us about Sydney. What's the difference with what's happening up in Sydney? What are you writing in terms of loans? Is the incomes having to go up? Is the lending changing? What are people borrowing out that way?
Now, it's a good question. Because we serve the entire legal community from graduates, as I said, to managing partners, our average loan size, because we look after barristers as well, is about 1.3. What we're seeing is first home buyers, if we look at the subset, were priced out of the market when rates were crazy low. Now we're starting to see first home buyers able to get into the market because they're able to finally get a price that's affordable, but they're paying a premium on the rate. In terms of, I would say, the kind of lending borrowing power that's been hit, it's around the $1.52 million mark is where we're really seeing buyers and sellers having to temper their expectations. Buyers are having to look at suburbs that they weren't considering before, and sellers are obviously having to realise. It's like the stages of grief. People are starting to realise that this is a different market than October 2020 when things just kind of went berserk.
Thanks for joining us on the New Property Show.
Thank you so much, Steve. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Good man.
I'm joined here by Suvid from Cinch Loans. Thank you for joining us on the show today. Specifically, you're a first home buyer specialist, and of course you focus on investment properties as well. But more importantly, how long have you been in the industry, and what are some of the changes you've seen the last 5 to 10 years?
Thanks for having me on the show, first of all, Steve.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to be here. To answer your question, look, I've been in the finance industry for around 20 years now, broking specifically for about 4.5 years. Prior to that, I was an investment banker and a strategy consultant. So I've tried to bring a lot of that knowledge into the industry to help first home buyers with not only just getting their first home loans, but also building a portfolio out of that and managing it. So what we've done is in the last 4 years, we've focused primarily a lot on first home buyers and a lot of home and land packages and construction loans, just to be able to help new entrants into the market get there, because there's a lot of lack of education when it comes to first home buyers. So that's the area I'd like to specialize in.
Perfect. So let's do a bit of a case study here. So, for example, Melburnian is going to buy a house and land package, whether it's metro or regional. I believe the grants are the same now for the first home buyer grant, so it's $10,000. We're working with a $600,000 package.
Yep.
Love to explore the numbers a little bit further.
Sure.
Ideally, what do you want to see a first home buyer turn up with? And what are some of the incentives that are going to help him or her or them across their, entering the new home market?
Of course. So first and foremost, it's important to understand that if you're buying a home to live in, then you are typically looking at around 8 to 9% as a contribution. The myth is you need a 5%, but then there's lender's mortgage insurance that you also need to account for. So generally ends up being around the 8 to 9% mark if you're accounting for your lender's mortgage insurance too. Having said that, there are a lot of government incentives out there that can help reduce that cost or reduce the deposit amount. So as an example, in Victoria, first home buyers can get a $10,000 first homeowners grant as long as they are within the property price limits. There's also a stamp duty concession. So up to 600,000 first home buyers don't pay any stamp duty at all. From 600 to 750, they get a discount on the stamp duty. And then after that, it becomes pretty normal, just like another buyer. And then if you are a citizen and it's a first home purchase for you, you are looking at, and obviously you are income tested. So for a single person, an annual income of 125,000, and for a couple applying or two people applying together, the total income to be under 200,000. Then you can go to certain banks through us where you put a 5% deposit and you don't pay any lender's mortgage insurance because the federal government actually guarantees it on your behalf. And then there's a similar scheme for single parents out there as well, where it's called the Family Home Guarantee. So that's a federal government scheme as well, where you only need to come up with 2% deposit and the remaining 98% can be a loan as long as you can service it without paying any lender's mortgage insurance. So there's a lot of benefits out there to help young people or first home buyers get into the market and get into their own homes and get out of the rent cycle.
Beautiful. Well, thank you for joining us on the New Property Show. Look forward to having you back soon.
Thanks, Steve.
Welcome back to the New Property Show. I'm joined here by Olga from Tax Assure. Who do you help, individuals or businesses?
So both. So we
Yeah.
help individuals and businesses and sole traders, anywhere from tradies right up to large clothing companies, for example, or ASX listed companies, wineries, anyone that has tax debt, whether it's an individual or whether it's a company, that needs time to pay, that needs breathing space, and if they've incurred interest and penalties, we're able to reduce the debt in a number of different circumstances.
Taking
for
a lot
them.
of pressure off, I guess, everyday mum and dads and some of the bigger corporations. And most of the time it's, I guess, for businesses, just cash flow or poor management, or they've been caught off guard. But there's been obviously a topic that's coming up a lot lately, which is obviously to do with directors and the ATO. So they're coming after these guys hard. What's happening here?
So before COVID, the collection focused in the ATO around winding companies up. So every company has a director, and the director is the owner of that company. And what a lot of people don't realise is that in lots of different circumstances, the directors can be liable for the company's debt. Now that includes GST, super and PAYG. So even if you think, oh well, the debt's just in the company, it doesn't matter, you can now become personally liable, and that's the ATO's focus.
What about lending, getting personal loans, or obviously buying new property?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So if the director then becomes personally liable, it can have huge ramifications if they ignore it, if they don't get it into a payment arrangement, and they don't become compliant. So that can affect their own credit rating. If the company doesn't pay it and they become personally liable, the ATO can come after them personally. And then if they've got individual tax debt, that has huge ramifications around whether or not they can lend, who they can borrow from, the interest rates, and even their credit ratings.
So what's the first signs of that? How has somebody normally come to know?
Sometimes it's a call from the ATO, sometimes it's from their accountant. The ATO are also sending a lot of notices called director penalty notices, which is when things become very serious about personal liability. So often we get a call once someone has received a director penalty notice. The ideal situation is if you know that you can't pay your tax, to seek help straight away. So the earlier that you seek help, the better arrangements you can get. But I think the other message is it's never too late. There are solutions and there is specialist help. So we're the specialist that just looks after that debt piece, gets you cleaned up, fixed up, on your way, and you go back to your accountant for all your normal compliance.
So when opening a brand new business, do you see this in the first 12 months? Should this be something that people should consider when opening up a brand new business in terms of how they're going to manage that debt? So if we went back a step, what should that be? Should that be a bookkeeper, an accountant before they get to you? What are some of the tips that you're giving to people so they're not ending up in these situations?
I think it's using the right specialists and the right advice for whatever they're setting up.
Yeah.
And accountants and bookkeepers are absolutely the ones to go to for compliance, for that advice piece. But if bad things do happen to people, a lot of people say to us, well, aren't you just helping people that haven't paid their debt or are avoiding their debt? That 99.9% of the time, terrible things have happened. People have got really sick. We've seen some instances where children have passed away, cancer, floods, bushfires, COVID. And so people just need a bit of help to get their businesses to survive and to take that pressure and stress off individuals and get them time to repay the debt and to give them that helping hand.
Do you think moving into 2023, what do you see I guess some of the complications been with the ATO? What do you think they're going to be looking for next? Obviously at the moment we're focusing on directors. What's next? Have you got a prediction on that?
So I think they're going to get even tougher. So we've sort of had a bit of a holiday. So a little bit like interest rates, for example. You can sort of say, oh, we've had massive hikes now, or you can look at it and say, well, we had a holiday for a couple of years. So the ATO weren't enforcing payment for a couple of years. So we're seeing much higher debt levels because people haven't paid. The collectible debt of ATO debt is at 46 billion. So I think we're going to see a lot of action taken by the ATO next year. Things like garnishee notices on people's businesses, winding businesses up, getting even tougher on directors, and really calling that debt in to be paid.
So for some of the people that are watching, garnishee, so do you want to explain a little bit about what that is?
Yep, so a garnishee notice is when if someone owes you money, the ATO can step in between and they can take a percentage of that. And if you have a debt, they're allowed to do that.
So with Tax Assure, and we haven't really touched on this before, but so the first step is they've given Tax Assure a call. what would happen next?
So we do a free review.
Yep.
So we go through and see a whole heap of different factors surrounding what the debt is, how much interest and penalties you might have, what red flags you have, which debt area you're in within the ATO, and how much work is going to be required to get you back into a compliant plan. But a payment plan you can afford. So there's no point just dividing the debt by 6 months and getting you into a payment plan that you can't afford. So that bit's free. And that tells us how much work is then going to be involved to get you in a compliant position. And then once you decide, yes, you want to proceed, we tell you what that fee is upfront, completely transparent. It's a fixed fee and we don't charge according to time.
Beautiful, fantastic. Well, thank you for joining us on the New Property Show.
Thank you.
Really good. I look forward to hearing from you next year on what's happening around tax, and you can rest assured we're in the right hands.
Thanks, Steve.
How are we doing? My name's Ash. I work in commercial lighting. I design electrical packages, partner with tradies and supply all the way through. This is a tax-based question, but I'm an individual in the highest tax bracket and I'm about to secure my first investment property in South Australia. Shout out South Australia. What can I do in the short and long term to reduce my taxes?
I'm going to say the first thing you should have considered is where you purchased that property in terms of what structure. Now, if it's cash flow positive, then you put in a trust, then you've got the choice of, say, distributing it to your partner and leveraging their lower marginal tax rate comparative to yours, which means less tax. If down the track you're looking to sell it, the capital gain again, you can distribute that capital gain to whoever you want. Usually it's yourself and your partner, again, leveraging that marginal tax rate. That's from a tax perspective.
Mina, can I ask you a question we haven't discussed on the New Property Show? There is a thing called a tax variation form or a Section 22(1)(d). What would your advice to be someone like Ash that's now holding a couple of properties? You can minimise tax another way. Do you want to talk a bit about a tax variation?
And you're talking about the form that you submit to your HR department.
Correct. That
Correct?
goes on to ATO.
Yes.
Yes.
So what's that saying to the HR department is, based on my, say, tax loss position from the property, as opposed to a cash positive position, talk about tax loss position, my income is going to be lower at the end of the year than what you're reporting to the ATO. So therefore, instead of withholding all this tax from me and giving it to the ATO, you're actually going to reduce the tax that you're passing on to the ATO. What's the benefit of that? Well, you can take that money and you can put it against the home loan, which means less interest payable, right? Another thing I'm actually going to say, just from a loan perspective, and you gentlemen could probably add to this, is you can look at restructuring your loan by having an offset feature. And with an offset feature, if you are looking to withdraw funds, the ATO doesn't look at the funds withdrawn, say for private purposes, as being non-deductible, because it's a separate account from the home loan itself. Okay, so that's something you've got to take into consideration too.
Beauty. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Hi, my name's Aston and I'm at school still, and my question is, how do you make a triple-decker house?
A triple-decker house? I thought we were going to go with a two-story house. All right, so who wants to answer that?
An extra story?
First thing I would say, Aston, is pull out a big piece of paper. Like anything, even if you're building in a single story or a double story, get the big piece of paper and you start planning and designing what you want on each level, and then you can come and chat to us and we'll help you piece it all together. But there'll be a builder out there that's super good at building triple-decker houses, so we'll find it for you.
Yes.
Good
So
answer.
can I give you some thoughts? So What I used to do when I was around about your age is I'd get brochures, I'd get them from the builders and I'd cut them out and I'd play around with the floor plans. So you can get brochures which are in the same ratio, so the same size, and you can cut and make like that. It's kind of fun to put together. And I would design the bottom story first and get all the bathrooms right in the living areas. Then I would design the top story. You got to think about your bedroom as well, because that needs to be where you play. And then you look at that and you've got to make sure the two fit on top of each other. But the most important thing that you need to consider is that if you had a really loud theatre room on top of a living room, that noise can go through there, so make sure they're in different spots. Great question, mate. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Can you beat that question?
Let's try. All right,
No
so
pressure.
my name's Eddie. I come from a family that's into developing, construction, and I also have my own jet ski business. So my question tonight is it's on a money lending perspective. So we've gone through a lot of disasters. We've gone through COVID, the past 2 years. We've gone through increasing interest rates, or we are going through that right now. It's more of a risk assessment for the lenders. So are you guys taking into account the bigger companies that have actually liquidated recently? Are you guys making that as a risk assessment nowadays as part of your lending criteria? Are you guys researching into, let's say, for example, I want to build 5 houses on a large property. I want to go with, let's say, Metricon. Are you guys researching into how these companies are going and what their future is? Are they going to go bust? Are they looking like they're going to go bust? Is that part of your risk assessment?
From a law point of view, we're not the lenders. So from a lender's point of view, I don't think the banks would take that into consideration. The mortgage brokers would work with, I suppose, the aggregators, the mortgage aggregators. So I don't think that's one of the
I
issues
think
that
where
they-
that might come up is it probably would go back to finance. And that may not go into necessarily the finance itself, but it may go into your valuers. Because your valuers need to look at, I guess, what's called funds to complete. Some of the things that I am seeing that have changed is progress payments are changing up front. So some builders are actually asking for a lot more money up front, which doesn't typically always meet the HIA standards.
Correct.
What happens in those cases? Do you see that happening? Have you seen the progress payments moving around at all?
Yes, well, there are different building contracts out there, so I think you need to be knowing your different, as a mortgage broker, you need to be knowing your different building contracts. You need to know what lenders, what building contracts that they like to work with. Some will accept some and some will accept others. But also, I think it is about the valuations will pick up any discrepancies around progress payments, and if they're not in line with HIA standards. And we've had situations where we've been able to get exceptions to those, but there's got to be a really strong case for why that would be met.
It's a great question. I might actually just give a little bit more depth, if that's okay.
That's fine, yeah.
So the depth would be this. Ultimately, and unfortunately, it lays on the client. At the end of the day, it's their responsibility to do the research. They present the contract, they present the builder, they present the land. There is no blame game. You need to do your research, and you need to speak to the right professionals and advocates and be surrounded. So if something does go wrong, you need to be looking at what's the liquidated damages cost, what's the builder's insurance, and how do I get out of this, and how do I find another builder if something does go wrong? Great question. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you.